Well, I'd like to welcome you back to the afternoon session. And the first disclaimer is I'm not Karina Jones. As you know, I'm Gerald Schreiber. Karina was going to moderate this panel, and due to she has a pregnancy, she's going to deliver a baby in 5 or 6 weeks, and they didn't think maybe she should travel. So this is going to be our board of directors. Your RCAF board of directors is a diverse group from across the United States. I'll just recognize all of them. Alan Pruitt isn't here. Dave Heights from Ohio. George Chambers, George has been your host, is from Georgia. Eric Nelson, you've seen. Justin Oberling, Mike Jones, Kyle Himmert, Shad Sullivan's been up front, Cash Caruth, Judy McCullough, newest board member, Brett Kinsey. Yeah, we didn't have a chair for Brett. Eric Groper. There's Eric Groper. George Washon from Washington, that area. And Frank Andrus, has been at the mic a few times. Frank, are you in the? Anyway, that's your board of directors, 14 seated members. Only Alan couldn't make it. So we're going to have a little insight, going to share some things with you. We're going to start off introducing you again to George Washon and Cash Caruth. Both are from states that run on BLM Forest Service land in combination with private. They have some unique challenges in their area. Would you guys like to take it away from there? Talk about wolves, predators, whatever you want to talk about. 2 or 3 minutes, 4 minutes?
George Washon here. We summer in Northeast Washington, so we get kind of a little bit of everything. Grazing-wise, anything from Forest Service, state-owned lands, our own private land, leased land from forest companies, and so we're in the timber country a lot with cattle, and so just seeing where the cattle are at is, has its own challenges. We have a whole host of predators to deal with and the problems within, and so that kind of leads to its own challenges of making sure that those problems are taken care of. Wolf-wise, we hear a lot. We're really blessed. We have some really good sheriffs that work with us and try to keep the state agencies lined out and representing the ranchers and the cattle producers as they would any other small businessman within the county that is having violence and burglaries and such. And so that's good. We're a long ways from the 5-area feeding region, so it makes marketing just a little bit different. Not quite as competitive market, so that's kind of something that we always have our struggles with. And so I don't know if there's any questions, but yeah, it's quite a ways from here. Enjoy being a long ways away.
And George, you're a cow-calf operation. Do you retain ownership? Do you sell through a sale barn? Do you contract? What do you do?
We're a cow-calf operation. We'll background our own calves and winter them out, and then sell them either to feedlots or maybe a stocker guy. We try to do it private treaty to some guys that we know.
And Cash, you're from New Mexico. Tell us how you operate and what challenges are facing you from a grazing predator standpoint. Last night you were sharing that you have the feral horse problem down there. I didn't realize that. Can you expound on that?
My name's Cash Caruth. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Hello. There you go. My name's Cash Caruth. We ranch in New Mexico, the High Plains. Some of the main challenges for us is, of course, drought like everybody else, and feral horses. We have quite a few horses around in our area. Water gaps, gates being left open, et cetera, et cetera. But as far as cattle and marketing, we haul to the sale barn. We do private treaty. We've done video. Pretty much whatever's bringing the most amount of money.
And you've retained ownership also, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
You've fed cattle.
Yes, sir.
And what about the feral horse issue? What comments do you have?
All the BLM's trying to clean it up. It's a challenge. They reproduce faster. They can get it cleaned up.
We're going to move down to Shad Sullivan, is not a cow-calf operator. Shad operates in 2 states. You want to tell us a little about your operation, Shad? And as you know, he's private property rights, and if you've heard Shad, it's about liberty and private property rights. So you take it away, Shad.
Yeah, well, I suppose I'm probably, well, me and Mike Jones are probably the only yearling people on the panel. Our operation is, we're just like a cow-calf guy. That's what we consider ourselves, only we don't own the cow. Primarily, we like to buy a lightweight calf. We've been at it since 1959. The drought of the 50s kind of forced my dad over, and so we like to buy a light calf out of the south, and we bring them to our operation in North Texas, where we graze on winter wheat until that winter wheat is completely grazed out, and then we send them north to our ranches in Colorado, where we then summer them on the short grass prairies of the high plains, and we try to utilize that country to put on cheap pounds. And then we do not retain ownership of those. All of our cattle are sourced from sale barns, and so we do not retain ownership. We kind of have the same, we've put together a team of people that have the same idea that we do, that we want them to have our idea. It's our idea, but it's a good team, so they know what we want, and we in turn know what our the next step in our operation is. So we've had the same buyers for many years, and it's just an operation that's been fairly consistent for us up until about the same time as yours, 2015. And so we also have a small commercial cow herd that we leave on our country in Texas, and what we produce out of those cows we source directly to the consumer. So we take those cattle, the product of those cattle, to Colorado, and we finish them on the grass of the Southeast Plains, and then we direct market those 2 to 5 a month. We don't want to get big. It's just me and my widowed mother, and so really since COVID, and we've always done that a little bit, but since COVID came along, that has been a blessing to our operation in a big, big way. So like everybody else, we're trying to diversify a little bit and stay in the game. And so that's who we are. In terms of property rights, there's so many, all of our lives are so complex. I mean, you can look out beyond agriculture and see that the issues that we all face as Americans are very complex. They're numerous. They're coming at us 100 miles an hour. You don't know where to turn, and it's the same thing with property rights. If I can encourage anybody to understand that property rights is not just land, it's your business. And these attacks come in many, many forms. We were just talking about carbon sequestration and the threat of eminent domain. Right now, we have the second largest power line coming across our ranch, or proposed to come across our ranch, and then a mile north of my mom's, a $1 billion solar farm coming in. So that changes the landscape, and it gets very complex. And I don't understand all of it, but I know that we go with it by day. And so my suggestion to everybody is make sure your governance goes from the bottom up. That's the way it's designed by the Constitution of the United States, not from the top down. That includes your markets.
Thank you, Shad. My wife always cautions me into taking time for a weather report, but can you do 30 seconds your contrast between Texas and what you call Antelope Mesa?
Yeah, so our country in Texas is located about 50 miles south of the Red River, south of Wichita Falls, Texas. We are a 30-inch rainfall a year, or precipitation a year. We don't get much snow. We get a little bit of ice. Our last good rain was in April. We had the worst winter on record. Didn't grow much wheat. We were able to spread out and get by a little bit. So it's been a disaster there in terms of the wheat crop and the summer grass growing. Now, last night we got a first 1-inch rain. contrasted that with northwest Crowley County, Colorado, where we're at, is a 9-inch precipitation per year. We had an 8-inch snow on July 10th of this year, and then it's rained 25 inches. So it's like the Garden of Eden, and it's just the opposite of what it's supposed to be.
You better
so.
call the realtor. There's 2 or 3 here.
We're ready.
Since we're moving down the line, Karina's script, I'm going to pick on Judy McAuliffe, newest board member from Moorcraft, Wyoming. Judy and Vanna White were 2 of the first out of state when we formed Colorado Independent. Judy and Vanna came down to Ridgeway, Colorado. Judy, you want to tell them a little about your operation and your concerns as a ICAO and an RCAF member?
All right. Yes, I'm Judy McCullough, and I'm from northeastern Wyoming, and the part I'm at is not in the trees that you think of around the Devil's Tower, but I'm out in the sagebrush and grasslands. It's beautiful grasslands, probably about the best in the state, in my opinion. And we are headquartered right along the Belle Fourche River in the old headquarters of the Empire Sheep Company that used to run in the early 1900s and had 100 sheep wagons and covered Wyoming, Montana, South and North Dakota with their wagons. In that country, the best way to run it is a cow-calf operation because it's not farming country. We can raise enough hay for the cows and the replacement heifers, but really not enough feed to finish or even background yearlings. So we usually sell the calves, been selling them for, I was just trying to think, over 40 years through Fort Pierre Livestock, and have built a reputation that they do really well there. We are short on precipitation. Most of the time our average is 15 inches. This year we got it, and we think we got a wet year because we didn't get that much the last 2 years.
And Judy, after completing your first year on the board, what is your passion? What can you tell these people that you've brought to the board? What's your burning issue? What have you learned? What have you seen from being a first-year board member?
Well, I really appreciate the staff. I want them to know how much they do to help us on the board, and especially Bill Bullard, who's a fighter like nobody's business. He takes care of his board, and he takes care of the members, and he scares the heck out of those guys that don't have the truth, and I don't know what we'd do without him. I want him to know how much I appreciate him. And as far as my passion, it kills me to pay that check off. I want to see the end of that because we're funding our own demise the same way. That the United States is funding its demise with the UN. Let's get out of this stuff.
Thank you, Judy. Dave Hyde from Ohio is our next board member seated here. Dave, you want to tell us a little about your background? You've been on the board a couple years?
3 years
I know,
now.
3 years,
Yeah.
because last year, yeah.
Yeah, I'm from Eastern Ohio, 60 miles from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, right in the heart of the Marcellus Utica shale boom over there. And I'm going to be honest, if that oil and gas didn't hit about 5 or 6 years ago, there would have been a heck of a lot of more people out of business over there. And I know before I retired, I got 35 years as a construction electrician and retired, and I went down to Belmont County on a well site down there, and there was literally a new tractor in everybody's garage down there. It was unbelievable. I got a cow-calf operation, and I'm a little more diversified than these guys. I help a couple guys out with broiler barns, so I got a front seat to the vertical integration, and I come pretty close to putting in a couple barns, and I'm sure glad I didn't because my buddies that have, they've changed their contract 3 times, and they've made them buy new equipment, and it's just like nothing's set in stone. I'm not going to say they're not making money, but you can't change your end of the deal, but they seem to come around and change their deal whenever they want to. And I also, on the weekends, I milk cows for a buddy of mine who happens to be the last dairy farm in the county. And I retain ownership of my steers, send them up to a feedlot, and that guy happens to be a veterinarian. And I was up there the other day picking some steers up, and he informed me that in a 1-month period, he lost 25 dairy herds. And it's getting pretty bad over in Eastern Ohio. as far as agriculture. I lost 150 acres of ground. I thought it was going to be pasture ground. And one day I see a tractor going up the road, and a guy goes in with a tractor and a planter, and they just take out the fences, and you can't find pasture ground around my area anymore.
And Dave, you mentioned the chicken business, and you're glad you didn't get there. You've warned us about that model.
Oh, yeah.
And I just wanted to inject, I sat by Zippy Duval at a meeting, and it's this last spring, and behind closed doors, he said, we don't want to see the beef deal go like the chicken deal. But outside of closed doors, we never heard another word from him. We better keep it rolling. We're going to, do you have a comment on the checkoff too, Dave or Mike?
No, what I was going to say, you was talking about Zippy Duval and that, and the USDA has got a comment period out for the competition in their pricing system. And I asked my buddies about that, and now the integrators have all sent letters to the producers telling them to write to USDA, and it's sort of like the beef. They says if we do away with the competition system, it's all going to be generic chicken.
Thanks, Dave. Mike, you want to go on? Mike's from Arkansas, so he's read his Karina's notes. She comes from the belly of the beast,
Belly of the
Tyson and
beast, yeah.
Walmart.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Mike,
Just putting
tell us
out-
a little about your operation and what you do down there.
Yeah, Angie, my wife, and I, we have a cow-calf operation in west central Arkansas. We also background some cattle. We buy some cattle in the fall, feed them through the winter, and ship them in the spring. We also have pot trucks. We started that last year to try and diversify our operation. Also, Angie, we raise our own cattle and retain ownership of some. She markets those for us. It's just like you have to have 5 or 6 jobs. I know there's a bunch of people out here that's sitting in the same situation, but we're a pretty good size. We're the 3rd largest cow-calf operator in our county, and the biggest one owns a trucking company that they're playing in the cow business. And so that's the way a lot of places are going. We're seeing influx from people from California, West Coast, coming in, buying property. 5 years ago, property $1,200 to $2,200 was a big price. Now it's nothing for them to come in and pay $4,000 an acre, and that's pasture land. I mean, and they just and they think it's a bargain when they're coming from western states and the bigger cities. But we're seeing the demise of our local farming operation, the cow-calf operators. We have tons and tons. We had tons and tons of 30 and 40 head, 50 head cow-calf guys. Now they had a town job, but they also raised quite a few of the cows in our area. Those are seemingly gone. I'm going to say we probably lost 80% in probably a 5-county area over the last 5 years.
And what brought you to RCAF? Mike, you and Dave came on the board about the same time.
Well, I was just so sick and tired of feeling like I was getting kicked in the ground all the time that a friend of mine, we saw Tatum had posted something on Facebook, and there was a meeting in Missouri. And so me and a friend of mine said, we're going to go to this meeting and see. And basically it was a rollover auction when we got there, and met Bill and some other people and started to get involved. And we knew that we had to fight for our operations just like you guys in the north. But all we had was NCBA or our local ACA, Arkansas Cattlemen's Association, which is just an arm of NCBA, because, we've tried to convince the people that, hey, your checkoff dollars are killing your farm. That's why you don't have any cattle now. That's why you can't. Just say, for instance, we have several 5 or 6 sale barns locally in a 10-county area, and there's 5 buyers. 5 buyers. JBS, National, Tyson will have one there, and then there'll be 2 guys that buy cattle, and they'll ship them, which we haul a ton of them for the guys out of Oklahoma. They'll ship them out there, put a bunch of cattle together, and then we'll ship them to Nebraska, Colorado, different places. But there's no farmers to come in and buy calves and background them or whatever. That's gone. So they're just big buyers there. But that's put a lot of pressure on what's going on with the operations in our area. The age of our ranchers in our area, I don't know what the medium range is, but it's pretty high. I mean, the age is pretty high because you can't afford $4,000 an acre, $100,000 tractors, $1,800, $2,000 cows as a young person. That's one of the things that my wife and I are really concerned about our operation one of these days, if our kids are going to be able to stay in and make it profitable, because we struggle now. So that's our goal, is to try and diversify our operation and keep it going to pass it on to our kids. And I think that's another reason that I joined RCAF, because I thought, well, there's somebody out there that's trying to do the same thing I am and fight for the cattle industry. And all these guys that I've met, and Chad and Brett and you, and I mean, a group of people that think like we do and fight like we do. We were somewhere and said, well, that RCAF group, that's a bunch of radicals. And I said, well, if that's what it takes to keep my operation going, that's what I'll be. So as I'm going to push everybody out there, go be radical. If you want to save your operation for your kids, your grandkids, and your property, you're going to have to be radical.
Thanks, Mike. Kyle Himmert is no stranger to the podium. He was on a panel last year. He's a sale barn former owner, a cow-calf man. Kyle, tell us about your operation.
Sure.
here.
So my wife and I, we both grew up in Northwest Kansas all our lives, and raised 5 kids, mostly through the sale barn and having cows and calves around and doing some backgrounding too. But great way to raise your family, of course, as you all know. But after 28 years of sale barn business, it's actually been 2 years ago, we decided we had an opportunity, so we jumped on it to get out of the sale barn business, because my daughters are all married and having kids, and my 2 boys are pursuing some other interests. So it's just going to be Barbie and I, and she's getting tired opening gates. So we're backing off a little bit on our cows. We're kind of pursuing a little bit of other interests. But every year, as you guys all know, every year is different, right? So what's going on with the drought? I mean, Kansas is where I'm from, in the northwest corner of the state, is right in the middle of this drought. So it's going to be really interesting how people are encouraging people to hold on to cows. But man, it's going to be tough. There's a lot of dry land crops that aren't going to make it, of course, but there's all the added fuel expenses and chopping silage and so forth. It's like, it's not cost feasible to do it. So this is going to be a really interesting year, and it's not just the cow-calf man and the yearling guys are going to have to worry about this. I'm in an area of a lot of feed yards, and man, they are scrambling. They're scrambling bad already. They're encouraging the people that have some irrigation that took weed off of it to get to planting some feed. The feedlots are going to be in trouble. I mean, they're going to be shipping corn in, but you still got to have the roughage and so forth, and it's going to be a battle, and we're right in the middle of that battle. So it's a 500-mile trip for me up here, come across the state line into Nebraska, into southwest Nebraska. It was rough. It was tough. And the biggest thing I think I'm seeing is that the scariest part about all of this is how short everybody's grass is. So this is going to have some long-term effects, the short grass. I'm guilty of anybody. I've, having too many cows on grass and abusing my grass. So,
Kyle, can you speak? You not only were an owner, but you've been known to buy cattle out of other barns. What do you see, and how does that translate with the early optimism and the cash sales through some of the videos? Can you expound on that a little bit?
The biggest thing that scares the heck out of me and that is sad is, I think it's been maybe 5-6 years ago, the government came out and loaned some of these young guys some money for cows. Started seeing some young guys come to sales and buying some cows. That was, that's pretty enlightening. But now, so 4 or 5 weeks ago, I started seeing some of these young guys having to sell their whole herd. That's pretty discouraging. And the biggest thing I'm seeing is I'm not seeing any new entrants at all. So sure, droughts come and go, but we're going to have fewer producers. And sure, that grass is going to be used by somebody. So when it does start raining, it's going to be pretty tough to talk these guys into getting back in the cow business, because I know several of them still paying on $3,200 bred heifers. So it's going to be really, really rough in that respect as getting some new entrants. So you're going to see some producers get bigger, try to have more clout. If the cow-calf man if you're not big, you might get ran over here, because they're going to have some clout with their calves and turn them into yearlings or whatever. They're going to have some bargaining power, and they know it.
Load lots.
Yeah, load lots. It's going to be really rough on guys that don't have load lots. That's what I'm seeing.
Let's keep trucking, Kyle. We'll come back. Next young man is Justin Oberling, kind of from a different, Justin comes from a cattle buying, your Missouri, Illinois area. If you want to tell the people about you, Your dad preceded you on the board. You want to tell us about your operation, Justin?
Yep, we're right in western Illinois. I spend about as much time in Missouri as I do in Illinois, but my dad and I have fat cattle buying business. We're basically in a sale 6 days a week, buying for a regional packer that we've been sending cattle to for nearly 30 years. And at home, basically background steers, we buy them in the spring and make true grass yearlings out of them in the fall. Try to sell them in load lots in the fall. At one of our kind of sales we work with. That's kind of what keeps me busy, especially.
But you're unique. You also handle fat cattle in your buying service, don't you? Which is
Yeah, strictly.
Fairly unique to what most of
We're
we
in
know.
our
Can
in
you
our
speak
area.
to that?
Yeah, in our area there's basically 2 fat cattle buyers, and we're one of them. My grandpa started that, and most of the sales there's only 2, and some of the bigger sales will be 3, but we're kind of, it's either us or Tyson basically. There'll be some other guys that have some orders, but there's a lot less cattle out there too. There's
But so when you buy them, where do you mentioned Tyson? Where do you go? Where do those cattle end up when you buy them?
we have a smaller plant in Iowa we send them
So,
to.
an independent.
Yep.
Okay.
Privately owned plant. So then they, if it wasn't for them, market would be a whole lot different. Smaller regional plants are keeping it somewhat competitive in our area. But if we didn't have them, we'd have even fewer guys feeding cattle. There's nobody my age in it. I can maybe count on one hand someone in their 30s that might be finishing out a few. The rest of them are guys that are either got the ground paid for and they can't quit. They just keep going.
It's a disease, isn't it?
Yeah, but in them areas, them guys are feeding them. They have a lot of corn. Ground, 200 to 250 bushel corn is what they're used to, and they'll take, 25 to 30 or 40 bushel an acre off and use that to feed cattle, during the winter.
So from the area, we've talked about the checkoff. Well, the people you deal with, and you probably carried a petition in the Midwest there, what's their attitude to the checkoff? Are they strong proponents? Are there people against it? Tell us about Missouri and Illinois.
I'm trying to get people to see it, and people are starting to finally see it. But it's like the Illinois Beef Association and the associations in Missouri, once again, NCBA affiliates. And them guys know right where I stand. And it's every year, they struggle with smaller margins. They're finally starting to see it. But I'm afraid they need to take action more quickly. Otherwise, it's going to be too late for them. But that's kind of what we're seeing. I'm seeing. I've been hammering away at them. The guys are finally starting to see what's happening. But it's taken a while. Got a lot of them guys in our area are kind of just set in their ways, and they're just about on that verge of retirement every year. Every auction we go to, there's less and less fat cattle and less feeder cattle. And the ground just an hour north of our house sold for $24,000 an acre, and it wasn't.
Mike, better go to wherever he is.
And that ground used to have cattle on it.
Yeah.
They used to walk the grain off the farm. That's what there's no pasture ground in our area. If you do find a little patch, you're gonna have to clean it all off and refence it, and hopefully you get it for 10 years. And
You better keep rolling. I want to have you pass it to Eric Groper. Eric, you want to tell us the region you represent, and you came on the board representing why don't you tell us about your family and your operation, and then the region you represent?
Yeah, got a wife and 2 daughters. We got a cow-calf operation probably about 100 miles southeast of here. We're really dry also. It's a horrible drought all the way up in there. Just so you know, I don't get on stage much. Not a good public speaker. Yeah. I don't know, Gerald. The tribal nations representative, I guess, across the United States is my area. I've been talking to cattlemen all the way from Florida to the Blackfeet up in Montana, trying to find Indian cattlemen organizations to get on board with us to help push the cause. I run on a lot of, instead of BLM ground, it's BIA.
Okay.
It's owned by the tribes, the tribal members of that reservation, but it's controlled by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So it's just another offshoot under the Department of Interior. So.
And we have had, you guys will have to help me, was it the Navajo that came in on
Yep.
the labeling bill?
Yeah,
And-
Cash got the Navajo in.
Yeah, that's right.
We
Okay.
went to work on Pine Ridge, Standing Rock, Cheyenne River, Rosebud, and this in South Dakota.
And so far, they've held back, or,
Pine Ridge passed a resolution.
okay,
Standing Rock's working on it. Rosebud's working on it. Little reservation in Nebraska, Santee, they passed it. If you can get in to the tribal governments and talk to them and explain to them what MCOOL is, it's easy.
good.
It's getting in there.
Well,
you
we
know.
appreciate your efforts. And you market your calves through a auction barn?
Yeah, Phillip Livestock. Baxter should be here somewhere, but yeah, most guys in my area take them right off the cow in October, November. So,
Eric Nelson, you've, is our marketing chair and a board member. You want to tell us the region you represent and a little bit about your operation, Eric? You're a resident cattle feeder, or our board cattle feeder.
Yeah, thanks, Gerald. Yeah, I'm from Mobile, Iowa, which is just 20 miles east of Sioux City, or 100 miles straight north of Omaha, Nebraska, as a crow flies, and I represent Minnesota and Wisconsin. And it's really pretty representative. There's still, there are a lot of farmer feeder operations still in those three states, and particularly eastern Iowa, northeast Iowa, and they've been hit really hard by loss of packing plants in those areas, especially. You get over in that country, and as Justin knows, it's fewer and farther in between before you get to plants. I'm just sitting here. I've been counting. Probably when I first joined RCAF, I had 11 slaughter plants that bid on my cattle within 100 miles of where I live, and now there's 3. Well, there's 4, but there's 4 plants, but one of them sparingly bids. So that's the kind of change that we've seen. In the last 20 years, we've been, our family's been in the same area for 140 years raising livestock, and it's been, cattle all along. It was a lot of sheep. My grandpa Roy fed a lot of sheep in the 30s and 40s, and we still have maybe a few remnants of some sheep fence around. Grandpa used to rip posts in half, and so we still got some old remnants of that. But we've been feeding cattle and raising hogs.
Can you speak to we've had Mike coming out of, and Dave with the chickens in Ohio, Mike coming out of contract broiler country, but can you speak to, and the group knows, but what happened to hogs after 98? Can you share that again? I think it's always pertinent to the business we're in, and we don't want to see vertical integration. Can you speak to that a bit? Because Iowa was a big hog state, family farm hog state, before 98. And
yeah, the corporate takeover of hogs, it started really down in, it was the Seaboard Corporation down in Oklahoma that really started they put up a plant there and built the infrastructure to farrow a lot of hogs and raise a lot of hogs. And I was traveling that country in the seed business. We still have a retail seed business, and in those days I was on the road as a sales manager, and I told this story before. I come over a rise, and it was blinding in the distance, the reflection of all the new steel on all these hog buildings. It went for miles and miles. And I got on a hilltop where I had good cell service, called my brother who was in the commodity business, and told him that the hog industry was going to drastically change and in a hurry. And we still had sows at that time. That was 1995. And the last sows that we sold, they brought 55 cents. And within two and a half years, market hogs brought 8 cents because of the choke point that had been established by, a lot of closed slaughter facilities. And then, of course, the genetic changeover came. Once they had control, they dictated change in genetics, and in order to raise those hogs, you had to have a change in facility. And then you had to build new barns in order to feed the new hogs, and then the bankers decreed that you would have to have a contract in order to get the money to build the buildings, and that all happened in 2 years. And so it's what's unsettling for me. They're the only expansion that's going on right now in feedlot country in the upper Midwest is with confinement barns. Otherwise, outside pens are either status quo or they're being taken out. But there is quite a bit of new building of these confinement facilities, and there's a lot of promotion from some of the big ag organizations saying that that the only real good producers anymore only are raising cattle in those controlled environment type facilities. The problem is right now it costs $1,900 a headspace to build one of those barns.
And Eric, we heard Michael Stumo, we heard Tracy yesterday. Let's tie this, Michael Stumo tied this. We just came through the COVID escapade. Can you specifically, in like a minute and a half, talk about this concentration of hogs and what that did to the supply chain? It was a total wreck. Can you expound on that with, they couldn't market the hog?
Yeah, I mean everything in the hog business, it's amazing. When they show up to build a new finishing barn, and I know I'm probably speaking the choir here. A lot of people are aware of this, but they'll have a anticipated delivery date of those feeder pigs the day that they start to move dirt to build that barn, and then they'll have the day scheduled when they're going to be loaded out as market hogs. The custom power washing crew shows up the next day, and it's already scheduled then that the next day the next round will come in. Well, when plants shut down, it was a disaster. It was a major victory at the JBS plant in Worthington, Minnesota, that they had enough of a crew for a week to slaughter the hogs, and then they where normally the offal would come out when they were running a normal slaughter processing shift. They had enough people to slaughter them, not enough to process, so they loaded side dump trucks for a week and hauled those hogs down to the rendering works for Tyson in Sioux City that wasn't being worked because the cattle plant was shut down, and didn't even tarp them. And there were hundreds of trucks a day hauling euthanized hogs out of that plant in Worthington, Minnesota down
So I think that speaks to food security and this idea, this model of concentration that we so resist as independent cow-calf men, feeders. This is why we do what we do, and you guys know that. Eric, gonna have to pass the baton to Brett Kinsey. Brett and his brother George operate a backgrounding cow-calf. Brett, you want to tell us what you do over there at Gregory?
You bet. Like Gerald said, my brother and I and her mother and our 10 kids, we probably a pretty similar story to a lot of you. We started out with hogs, sheep, cattle, had a cow-calf herd, got bangs one year, couldn't track it down, but all our cows had to get ground, so we had all this feed. So necessity is the mother invention. We started custom feeding some cattle, bought some calves, and we've continued to do that and grow with that. And we've gotten back into we have a commercial cow-calf herd because that's the magic that gets kids hooked on egg. Lucky farm animals are all cute when they're little, or we'd be done for. Yeah, so I mean, we do some grass cattle. My dad was deathly afraid of the futures market. He said, and I'll just be honest. He said, if you want to lose the place over a lifetime, go to the sale barn. If you want to lose it in 2 weeks, play the futures. He was afraid of it. And I'm not saying you can't use it successfully, but so we're believers in diversification and spread marketing. Our cow-calf herd is verified natural. We're set up to feed program cattle. Besides bowing to the corporate master, I can't think of another way we can add value. What else, Gerald?
you know, Brett Kinsey, and not by himself, but there's a deal out there at the registration, the cattle industry, our goals. You were very, can you share with the group why you pushed that and why you thought we needed that, goals? It was a reaction to NCBA's and only better, I think. But can you speak to that just briefly?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so much disinformation, right? You guys are all just a bunch of rabid radicals. I mean, it's crazy. That's just the perception of the outside world, but I know what drives me, and I've talked to a lot of you, and I love talking to all of you because I see thankfulness and hope. And that's why, you know, it's hard. I can't remember which speaker talked about it. You have to have kind of a macro view of this because, man, if you start dialing in on every little issue, you'll blow people's heads off. It's complicated. There's so many interactions going. But I thought that it was important that we get it down from front to back and get it down on paper, what we stood for, so that we couldn't be misconstrued in the media. I think that that's very important. Policy matters, all right? It helps us know what we believe in. It helps others know, so that's why I thought that was so important, and it really was. You know, when the world was holed up with COVID, we were on the phone and Zoom putting this thing together. You know, we would tell Bill what we wanted, he would put it together, we would proof it, we would go back, refine it, maybe change the order. We tried to make it understandable, so I mean, I would urge you, I'm sure there's copies out front that you can get, because interestingly, when you stand on principles, your goals don't change very much. It's as applicable today as it was then.
And Brett, I would note that when we came out with that, our platform wasn't to be carbon neutral by 2040. And I don't want to engage any of you into climate smart agriculture, but contrast the difference with what we came up with as a board and with Bill's help. Really, carbon neutrality is the goal of the other organization. And you know, I think we're about profitability, about communities. Wasn't that some of the reason that you board members felt like we needed to? It wasn't just Brett's, it wasn't Bill's program, it was the board's. And so
yeah,
anyway,
I mean, I'm lucky. I have a million good ideas, but I can't get anything done. So that's where these guys come in and apply and carry the buckets and get it done. The staff is awesome, and that's what. The paycheck of this is the collaboration, you know? It's that I don't have to be the smartest guy in the room because I'm not, but I can find them.
Well, we know that.
I know. I thought that I should admit that in public.
Yeah.
Groper and I are going to take public speaking classes at some point, but we'll get through it.
And while he's finishing that thought up, and I didn't mean to omit, Frank Andrus, would you wander up here? Most of you know him, he's been at the microphone. He's our board member, Mr. Parody, and I don't say that lightly. Everybody has a different background. Frank is our board member from California. So if Frank, and I'm not taking your mic away, but not to omit Frank Andrus.
Come on up, Frank.
And I believe, Frank, you're completing your termed out, right? Are you termed out?
I believe so, yeah.
But this is Frank Andrus from California. You want to tell us a little about your operation, Frank?
We moved our farming operation here 35 years ago from Southern California up to Northern California, a distance of 600 miles. And what happened is down in Southern California, we were farming about 2,200 acres of just dry farming land. And in order to get the 2,200 acres together, we had over 30 landlords scattered all over the United States, and we were leasing some pieces as small as 5 acres. And it just got to be such a nightmare. And I tell this joke rather lightly. I hope my wife is still asleep there, but anyway, she was responsible for doing all the calculations on our share rents and so on. And pretty one day she said, you know, if you don't do something about this, I'm going to leave you. And so that's when we decided to go north. But anyway, we went up to Northern California, and we have our farm is up there. It's all hill ground. It's very similar to the Palouse country in eastern Washington. We dry farm there about 2,500 acres. And in addition to that, we have a cattle herd of about, run about an average of about 183 mother cows there. And we made a decision. I was 50 years old at the time. And we made a decision that, you know, we still think there's some hope for agriculture and farming. And we brought our two sons in, and they both live on the ranch with their families. And hopefully we can make enough for all of us to make a living. But anyway, it's very important that we look at ways to increase the value of our grain production and also of our cattle production. And we run our cattle strictly on the ranch. Our cows never leave the ranch. Of course, our feeder calves make a one-way trip there every year, so that's the way we do it. But we use barley stubble as our main feed there, and the drought has hit pretty hard up there. When we moved up there, our average rainfall was 18 to 22 inches. And the past 2 years, year before last, it was 9 inches. And then this year here that just completed is just shade under 14 inches. But that 14 inches, we got the majority of that early in the year. And then in February, when we normally get a lot of rain, it went down to 0, and it's been 0 ever since. And we're losing our well water. We drilled 6 wells on the ranch here 4 years ago, and 3 of them have already gone dry. And so this is really, we're really concerned about the future there. So we're.
What about, we always hear California is so overregulated, so we won't go there, but what about young people? What do you see in terms in California? Young livestock producers?
I would say it's about the same as every place else. You know,
okay.
It's really difficult for the younger farmers to make a go of it. What has happened, and I think some of you have heard about this, that we have the highest suicide rate in among young people of any occupation, and the reason for that is. They see their fathers and grandfathers on their farming operations and cattle ranches, and their fathers and grandfathers, they did fairly well. And here they don't understand it. What's happened, that a lot of those, they're gone deeply in debt trying to stay afloat. And of course, that's why I'm such a strong advocate of parity. Because without parity prices, our young people will not be able to stay on the farms.
Thank you, Frank. The timers, I'm going to have to be the Grim Reaper. This idea with the program committee, and Karina was to host it. This is your RCAF board. This is your diverse representative board. I would like you to give them a big hand.
And while you're on your feet, we've accomplished quite a task here. We got Gerald Schreiber to stand in one spot for quite a while. If you've ever talked to Gerald on the phone, it's quite an experience because, Kinsey, yeah, what's up? What's going on, Gerald? Did you hear this? Well, oh, I got Kay's waiting on me. I got to go. And that's the conversation over and over again. But we've really enjoyed and appreciating having Gerald as our president. He's a solid of a human being as you'll ever find. So as a board, we thank him, and we'd like you to give him a hand too. Thank you.
Well, and I just like to say, you guys know the asset we've had in Bill all these years, but this is a team. You know, Bill is a resource that none of us take for granted. He's a unique individual. But I think, Bill, you'll admit, in the last few years, and we've had tremendous board members over the years, but these guys are solid and they're a team. They work together and they're working for you guys. And so I get disillusioned from time to time, and Bill has said it, but Stumo said it too. We got to chip away. We're not going to win the 100-yard dash. It's a chip away process, and sometimes that gets a bit overwhelming, but we're seeing it. We're getting recognition. Eric sees it in Iowa and with these politicians. But thank every one of you guys, and hopefully this gave you some insight to what these guys, where they're from, and what they're doing for you. Thanks again, guys.